fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
Several shots were fired as President Kennedy's motorcade passed through downtown Dallas.
None of us will ever forget this day. Yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I have a dream. My 4 little children one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Welcome to the Hagmann Daily Show, weekdays 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And now your hosts, Joe Hagmann and Jon Robberson.
Hello and welcome to this Thursday, April 12th, 2018 edition of the Hagmann Daily Show. So glad to be here today. A lot going on. We're going to just dive right in to the news as we are still awaiting what the U.S., if any, response will be in Syria. I've had a chance to read a number of things. John, yesterday you mentioned, where's Mattis? Where's the Secretary of Defense in these matters with Syria? Well, he has made some statements, and good statements at that, stating that there's no evidence that Assad or the Syrian government was behind this latest chemical attack, and that we cannot rush to judgment. There's an article up on Hagmann Report, Mattis on Syria, and you can find that at CNS News. But the bigger question is, what will Trump's response be after yesterday's tweets about nice new, shiny missiles coming, smart missiles? Everybody's awaiting this retaliation, which Russia always says it would meet with. It would consider that an act of war, and it would meet with hostilities, not only shooting down the missiles, but also shooting down the vessels that launched the missiles. So a very serious, intense situation that we see on the international stage, but what, if anything, will come of it? This is what we need to get to the bottom of immediately, as Trump is on the verge of alienating his base that got him elected with military action in Syria. I know it might not be evident by watching some of the conservative mainstream media, who apparently is cheering on a strike against Assad in Syria. But again, we've talked about this at length. We've seen the same pattern, the same MO by the globalists. Really, just 1 year ago, today even, we saw this gas attack attributed to Assad. We also saw the same thing in 2013, never with any evidence to back up their claims, always questionable where the videos and initial reports come from. So, is anything more clear today than it was yesterday or the day before? We have Russia calling for an investigation. They claim that there's no evidence of chemical weapons being used in Duma, that the hospital that was reported to have all these dead bodies in the basement, they visited there was no dead bodies. Also, doctors there said that nobody was treated for chemical weapons. So who do we believe? And are we going to find ourselves in a military conflict over another false flag attack? That's the big question. And it seems like the mainstream media is gung-ho for war. And this is not a good place to be. John, did you get a chance to read what General Mattis said?
To be perfectly honest with you and the listeners, I did not. So I'm going to be right there with the listeners, being brought up to speed by the fact that you did read it. I just want to add quickly, Joe, and let's stick with the General Mattis thing, but just to compliment your opening commentary, Ron Paul just blasted the administration as well as Theresa May and the British parliamentarian sentiment in his piece at ronpaulinstitute.org. He was on RT yesterday with host Ed Schultz, and this article.
There we go.
I'm sorry.
John, my headphones, I apparently shorted out. It sounded like you dropped off. Sorry about that.
Well, just in case I did, to echo quickly, Ron Paul was interviewed yesterday by Ed Schultz on RT, and he really did not mince words. This can be found at ronpaulinstitute.org, written by Adam Dick. And Ron Paul said, quote, "The whole idea that all of a sudden Assad's gassing his own people, I think, is total nonsense," declared Ron Paul in a new RT interview with Ed Schultz. Again, the article is headlined, "Ron Paul, total nonsense to claim Syria President Bashar al-Assad is gassing his own people." And Joe, I know you like to read comments, and I do too, because they're anecdotal, but they really kind of do give you an idea of where people are at.
Yeah,
and a lot of people, I think both on the left and right, I'll go as far as to say on the left as well, they're not buying the story.
Well, that's good. I mean, that is what we need. We need the people to be able to see through the lies. And this is one area where, the alternative media has been, I guess, the value of the alternative media is shown, because you don't get on the mainstream people questioning the official narrative. You don't get people who seem to care about the truth. They care more about advancing a narrative, and they don't ask questions, pertinent questions that any person with common sense would ask if in these positions, which leads you to more questions about their loyalty and what their true agenda is. But from at least what we've seen in Syria, I don't understand how that can be, unless they're intentionally trying to deceive everybody, because how do you have the same false flag happen over and over unsuccessfully, and you try it again, and you're so sloppy as not to have any of the evidence there, to back it up with
it's like a reshoot.
Yeah, are they getting sloppy, or what is this? I mean, I don't quite get it.
Well, let's circle back to what you were going to drop on us about Secretary Mattis. I've got a piece from Town Hall written by Chris Reeves up from yesterday. Secretary Mattis, U.S. government not sure who carried out chemical attack in Syria. So is the takeaway here that the Secretary of Defense, Marine General Mattis, is in fact publicly placing sort of a contrarian point of view against what the president tweeted yesterday morning?
What was that?
I'm sorry, that was sloppy. I'm sloppy on my semantics. Forgive me, listeners. It's only 9 a.m. on the West Coast where I'm at through Sunday, so I'm not popping on all cylinders like I am when I'm back east with Joe. But townhall.com's got a piece up by Chris Reeves, and the headline says, Secretary Mattis, U.S. government not sure who carried out chemical attack in Syria. Now, this was posted midday yesterday after President Trump's, as we were calling them, cavalier tweets. Do we have a situation where the Secretary of Defense is stating a contrarian point of view to the president?
Well, that's a great point you make, John. And well, at least we don't know where Trump's head's at. We did yesterday when he talked about launching the missiles. It appeared that that's what he planned to do, because we saw just days before that him issue a 24 to 48 hour time limit as to their response. Now, the only thing that makes me think otherwise, that maybe they're on the same page right now, is that we have not seen that strike take place. And this was after, over 24 hours ago, we got that warning from the president on Twitter. So maybe he is coming around to the idea that this wasn't Assad, but just not saying so publicly. And I had a chance to listen to a little bit of Michael Savage's show yesterday, and he had on Pat Buchanan, and they talked about how Trump really put himself in a tough spot by issuing those threats about launching missiles, because he is now in a position where he might look like his predecessor, Obama, by not taking action after issuing a threat. So it's a very interesting and delicate situation, but I would hope that the president has more common sense than to launch a missile strike to protect his reputation or ego or whatever it is.
Oh, let's pray God that he does. Look, in President Trump, let's just sort of hypothesize what I think is a significant portion of what got him elected. Particularly, we've got to focus, in my opinion, when we look at the political side of this, on the 5 swing states, all fairly close neighbors to where we're at in Northwest Pennsylvania, that swung red for the president. In some cases, the first time these states have voted red in 30 years, Joe. We're talking about Wisconsin. We're talking about Pennsylvania. We're talking about Ohio, Indiana. Indiana generally goes red, but the individuals who voted for Trump, I think, in those states, particularly, being boots on the ground myself in Pennsylvania the last 9 months, I think a lot of them voted for the president because they were hopeful that he is the type of I don't know, you could say renegade. It's a great word, but it's applied to John McCain far too often. I think the right thing for the president to do would be to stick his ego on the back burner on this one and walk this thing back, understanding that the tweets that went out yesterday morning, and we're all guilty of sending stupid tweets. I know I get defensive or aggressive on Twitter once in a while too, but this piece, Joe, from commondreams.org. Now that's
Is this
a
still
site
on
I'm
Syria?
not real. Yeah.
Okay, because I got 2 pieces here with updates on what Trump's Twitter status, and then something from France.
Well, why don't you give us the update? Let's do Trump's Twitter first, and then I'll come back in with this piece. Some international law experts sent an open letter to the president, but let's cover that. That's secondary. I want to know what the president's doing on Twitter first, so go ahead.
Okay, so this was updated 7 minutes ago from Reuters, and I'm reading this as we go. So Trump says Syria attack could be very soon or not so soon. Kind of strange headline. Let's see what his actual tweet says.
What is he tweeting out fortune cookies?
Yeah, right. So U.S. President Donald Trump cast doubt on Thursday over the timing of his threatened strike on Syria in response to a reported poison gas attack. France has said it has proof of Syria's guilt, but needed to gather more information. And that's the other report from BBC. And I have read through this prior to the show. Syria chemical attack. France's President Macron has proof. But if once you read the articles, they offer nothing as far as what that proof is. So I don't buy that for a second, not at all. But continuing with this Reuters report, fears of confrontation between Russia and the West have been running high since Trump said Wednesday that missiles will be coming. Never said when an attack on Syria would take place. Could be very soon or not so soon at all, the president said at a tweet Thursday morning. So, John, maybe we're seeing, hey, I'll take this. I'll take this for now. As long as he is not launching those missiles based on the belief or misconception that Assad launched a chemical attack against his own people, I don't care what his excuses are.
Did you ever have a situation when you were younger where you thought somebody really had a licking coming? I'm talking back in the high school days, junior high days, and then you realized almost last minute that the information you had was faulty, or the girl lied, or somebody set you up, and you wound up shaking hands with the person and you didn't go to fists? This may be one of those situations. As cheesy as that analogy is, I think many of our listeners will get it.
Yeah, but this is we're not talking about just a launch against Assad or Syria. This has international ramifications for the potential of conflict, because you have so many other countries involved in this whole Middle East Syrian civil war, as they've been calling it, from Russia to Iran. You have China. You also have on the other side the NATO powers, as useless as the rest of them seem to be, from the UK to France and on and on. And again, Macron, the president of France, says the Syrian government carried out the attack, which aid groups have said killed dozens of people, and will decide whether or not to strike back when all the necessary information is gathered. We have proof that last week's chemical attacks that chemical weapons were used, at least with chlorine, and that they were used by the regime of Assad, Macron said, without offering any details or any evidence. So
imagine if you were on a long road trip. You've got Trudeau driving, Macron is riding shotgun, and you're in the back seat hanging out with Merkel.
I'd be sucking on the exhaust pipe, John.
Let me jump in quickly. This underpins nicely what you just dropped. This from commondreams.org, and I want to be clear. I don't know this platform, Common Dreams, but they do curate it from time to time at Daily Sheeple. And as you know, Joe, Daily Sheeple is one of my favorite aggregate sites. This is interesting because it's a it's a open letter from a number of different political luminaries over many administrations. But the gist of it is, as the headline states, international law experts warn Trump that attack on Syria would be, quote, crime of aggression, end quote. And this article just opens up saying, just ahead of U.S. President Donald Trump's tweet early Thursday warning that a military attack on Syria will take place at some point in the future, Joe, as you said, either, quote, soon or not so soon, a group of international law experts declared in a statement that any such attack would amount to an illegal, and we have to pay attention to this, it would amount to an illegal act of aggression, which has been defined as, quote, the supreme international crime. Now, an illegal act of aggression, Joe, on the international law scene, that puts us in the same category as the Germans invading Belgium back in 1914 or Hitler moving into Poland in 1939. I mean, we don't want to be on that list. It goes on to say, quote, the unlawful killing of any human being without legal justification under every legal system is murder, the expert said, quote, and an act of violence committed by one government against another government without lawful justification amounts to the crime of aggression. The supreme international crime, which carries with it the evil of every other international crime, as noted by the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg in 1946. Just to skip down, and there's a great synopsis of this open letter, or I guess they're calling it a statement. But some of the people who signed this, it's an interesting smattering of people. You've got Dr. Dobler, who's a professor of law at the University of McKinney. You've got Abdeen Jabara, civil rights attorney and co-founder of the Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. So those are some questionable figures. You've got Ramsey Clark, who I don't mean any disrespect toward the former attorney general, but I wasn't sure if Ramsey Clark was still alive. But he was the 66th attorney general under Jimmy Carter. You've got people from the Harvard School of Law here. You've got Thomas Jefferson School of Law represented. So whereas a lot of these people are sort of noted liberals, this is one of those weird situations, Joe, like fluoridated water or GMO foods, where the right and the left can find some common agreement on this one.
And that is very true, John. But, with the political divide that we see in this country, I don't know. I mean, at least I'll say this. The people who are Democrats, who are not the extreme progressive types, absolutely there is common ground with the rest of the country. But that extreme group on the left, we have to push those people as far away as possible and keep that divide there, because there is no common ground. And also the extreme right, from the few actual white supremacists and warmongers and whatnot, those have to go in the same basket as the extreme progressive left. But when I see stories like this, John, and I just want to switch gears here.
Before you do, I just want to echo the sentiment that you just dropped. This is important that people make this distinction if you choose to spend time with Joe and I every day. I find the far right, the Elohim City, the skinheads, the quote, Jews are behind everything conspiratorium, I find all those people as repugnant as the Antifa people, Joe.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And we have to, because there are extremes on both sides. And we see anymore that the mainstream, and especially the extreme left, tries to lump the independents and conservative-minded people into those extreme groups, where you see things like all Republicans are racism, or the GOP is white supremacy, and we see this constantly. So we need to distance ourselves from these people as much as we do the other side of the political aisle on the extreme. But how can we find common ground when we have stories like this? The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, has published an article celebrating the FBI raid on Trump's personal lawyer as a victory for the rule of law, not a violation of attorney-client privilege and the president's constitutional rights. And this is on Breitbart from earlier today. Earlier this week, the FBI raided attorney Michael Cohen's office's apartment and hotel room, seizing materials that included communications from Trump to his lawyer. The government typically cannot have access to those communications. In cases where it is necessary to study such communications, the FBI enlists an independent team that sifts through the material, theoretically only passes on evidence to prosecutors that does not violate attorney-client privilege. However, critics allege that there is a great potential for abuse, especially in a politically charged case like this. They point out that such raids on attorneys are very rare and argue that the president's Fourth Amendment right to privacy, Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, and his Sixth Amendment right of counsel have been compromised. But the ACLU is not on they're promoting the other side. If this were Hillary Clinton being investigated and they had went into her lawyer's office, the ACLU would be on every television station in America jumping up and down. That is what Alan Dershowitz said on, I think it was Hannity's show on Fox News this week.
He was just to elaborate on that. Dershowitz appeared last night with Sean Hannity as well as Joseph DeGeneva, and I know we've all been following him more, over recent weeks. So, of course, excuse me, I just started the video on accident. But this, there's a great piece, Joe, at the Conservative Treehouse today that summarizes the interview. The video in bed is there as well. And again, with DeGeneva and Dershowitz, you've got sort of the more liberal and then the more conservative point of view coming together in this. But Joseph DeGeneva came out and called James Comey, quote, a dirty cop, end quote, just straight up said this guy's a dirty cop. And Rosenstein is so incompetent, he should be fired by Attorney General Jeff Sessions tomorrow morning, meaning this morning. And both of them were in agreement. I think Sean was as well, but both of them were in agreement that it is not President Trump's job to fire Rosenstein. It's Attorney General Jeff Sessions' job to fire Rosenstein. But go ahead.
Well, yeah, it is. And one of the things that's interesting about this article that talks about how the ACLU is the nation's premier defender for privacy, and they've long maintained that the right of every American to speak freely to his or her attorneys is essential to the legal system. These rights are protected by the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments, and we are second to none in defending them, often for people whom we fundamentally disagree. That's the ACLU's own legal director's statement. And
it's a shame their actions don't support that statement, because I agree with the statement.
Well, then they go on to say, but we also believe that the rule of law is an essential foundation for civil liberties and civil rights, and perhaps the first principle of the rule of law is that no one, not even the president, let alone his lawyer, is above the law. And no one, not even the president, can exploit the attorney-client privilege to engage in crime or fraud. And this is all, circles back to what we've been talking about for the last year and a half about this. The president, there's not one shred of evidence that the president has broken the law. Yet these people act and think as though he's already been proven guilty. It doesn't make sense.
Well,
it's contrary to everything that these people and this country is supposed to stand for.
Well, Robert Mueller, as I noted in that article a few days back, I said Comey and McCabe are still fired, Strzok and Page are still employed, and Robert Mueller is still searching for a crime and the criminals. And that's what's happened here. I mean, this is the worst mission creep that I've seen in a special counsel's effort, certainly at least in my lifetime, Joe. And again, going back to Dershowitz's comments, we've got to be careful about bandying around attorney-client privilege, because technically attorney-client privilege would typically be invoked by President Trump rather than by Attorney Cohn. And the part that troubles me about this is we threw this Stormy Daniels X factor into the mix, a week and a half ago when a former porn star all of a sudden became, Miss USA overnight. And so we've got a special counsel that's looked at everything from Manafort to General Flynn. Now we're over here looking at the porn star, and we're raiding Cohn's office to see if there was impropriety in wire transfers, et cetera. The special counsel seems to me that it's completely run amok. It's a soup sandwich at this point. And I think, Joe, forgive me because I'm just getting this thought framed as we speak, but when we look back on the piece I just shared a moment ago with this open letter, as curated by Daily Sheeple over at commondreams.org. Now, we don't want to be in the category of acting as an aggressor state. We don't want that as part of our national complexion at this point. But on a domestic level, this special counsel is not helping us internationally either. It's making our country and our government and our laws and the Constitution itself look weak to the rest of the planet, in my opinion.
Absolutely, it does. And just by looking at sites like RT and others, you can see how they are talking about the fractured political system in this country and how they're really, I mean, if you read between the lines, they talk about a war, between these powers in the United States. And you have those who support the president and his supporters, the president, and the people he trusts. And then you have the people who are trying to bring him down and have been using criminal means to do so. And we learned from, I think it was Rand Paul yesterday, that Peter Strzok and Lisa Page still have their top secret clearance intact at that they have not had that taken away, even after all of the crap we've seen from these two.
Okay, and that, I'm sorry, Joe, that goes directly to the lap of AG Sessions.
Yep.
I'm tired of this guy. Okay, he shows up every 2 weeks. Half the time he's aiming his effort at something that's completely, just non-germane to the national topic, like going after the federal crackdown on states that choose to offer marijuana medically or otherwise. I mean, at the end of the day, who cares about something like that right now? We have a special counsel that's run amok, and as RT pointed out, and there's a great piece, Joe, from RT yesterday, and this was written by Rania Kalek yesterday, April 11. Biased media coverage of, quote, chemical attack, in quote, in Syria could provoke a dangerous new war. Now, Theresa May ordered some British nuclear subs to the region yesterday, and something that we haven't covered a lot, not because it's not interesting, but I think it's just been for expediency. But what about Theresa May and the wardrobes pounding out of the UK the last couple of weeks? It started with the purported poisoning, which we never, that story changed, half a dozen times? The poison was in the suitcase. No, it was in some beer. They were on a park bench. A cop was poisoned. No, he wasn't. Now he's okay. The father's dead. No, he's alive. I mean, that story just completely fell apart.
There's some more news on that story too, John. I just read this on RT that the OPCW, that is the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, published a summary of its analysis, which confirmed the British findings about a nerve agent used in last month's poisoning of a former Russian double agent, but has not said where the source of the agent was from. So, more to tell us nothing. I mean, they confirmed that there was a poisoning that took place, but cannot speak to the origins of the agent used.
But see, I agree with your analysis, but in a bigger picture, I think it does tell us something. We just have to use our powers of inference with a dash of discernment here. With the poison scandal out of England, 3 weeks ago now, I guess, with True News accurately reporting, and I mean, this is on the record. True News laid it out very clearly 2 weeks ago that they had information that there was money being funneled through U.S. Mercenaries or contractors, some agency over there, some NGO type thing, into a chemical cache of weapons right there in that town of Duma. So when you take the poisoning scandal out of England, you add it to the report that True News dropped on the record a solid 10 or 12 days before this supposed gas attack on Sunday. And then you take that and you work it into the fact that Assad's military component is in a stronger position than they've been in recent years, as well as the fact that we all know politically that both Vladimir Putin and President Trump stated in the last 2 weeks that they want to get their military assets pulled back out of Syria. And yesterday, Joe, for the Hagmann Report, the evening show, the featured image I chose was a picture of President Trump speaking with Vladimir Putin one-on-one. And I looked in both of those men's faces, and I could be wrong, But I think that both of them personally want to walk this thing back. I don't think either one of them want to really start lobbing missiles at each other, because I frankly think at the end of the day, the two gentlemen respect each other.
Yeah, we see reports that Russia is telling its citizens to prepare for World War III. And obviously you're going to see the saber rattling when talking about, missiles being launched against you or your army. Or other operations in a neighboring country. And I do agree that, the people, the leaders, as well as many in the administration, would like to walk this back, don't want to see this conflict escalate any more than it already has. With the huge tensions we see between the U.S. and Russia right now, this just continues to get worse. One last thing here on the ACLU. One of the things that I really like that Alan Dershowitz talked about is the fact that, just imagine if this was Hillary Clinton and her lawyers were raided. He's right. The deafening silence from the ACLU and civil libertarians about the intrusion into the lawyer-client confidentiality is really appalling. And it is, at least the ACLU is consistent in their love of the left. But it is, this is something that we don't even have enough time in the rest of the show to talk about today, as far as what the implications are. And last thing, I see people, we see these people who say, Trump's playing 37D chess and Mueller's working with Trump. And what their argument is that, well, look, this is Mueller helping President Trump to bring down the swamp, because now the precedent has been set for past presidents and current presidents to have their lawyers' offices raided. And now they will start raiding the lawyers of Obama and Hillary and blah, 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 blah.
They did a test run on the sitting president. Okay, that is, what'd you call it yesterday? Hopium? I mean, that is hopeful journalism, in largesse. But I want to go back quickly, Joe. I know we've got Chance from Simply Clean Foods coming up here in a moment, but this is really important for our listeners to consider. Because once they depart from us today and they go back into their lives, we've got to sort through all this information. And, I love to draw on history as a guide. It's a very good guide. And this piece from Rania Kellek, I mentioned a moment ago, biased media coverage of chemical attack in Syria could provoke a dangerous new war. Let me just drop a quick piece of this, because this is exactly what got us into World War I. And most historians agree that World War II, in large part, was a 27-year ex post facto carryover from World War I. So we're talking about the two biggest wars in the history of humanity that, to a degree, were launched by nationalism that had just completely run afoul into national aggressive posturing, and through yellow journalism, and through the fact that the Pulitzers and the Hearsts of the time wanted to sell papers. This says, by jumping to conclusions about the alleged chemical weapons attack in Syria, Donald Trump's war cabinet and their media cheerleaders are recklessly pushing us closer to a military confrontation between Russia and the U.S. With his new national security, this makes me ill. With his new national security advisor, John Bolton, standing behind him, U.S. President Trump announced on Monday that everybody, apparently meaning Syria and Russia, quote, will pay a price, end quote, for the alleged chemical attack in Douma, a suburb of Damascus under the control of, I'm going to butcher this, of Jaish al-Islam insurgents, and that his generals were devising a military response. Trump has also said that he holds Russia responsible for the still unverified attack, signaling an escalation between Russia and the U.S., a dangerous prospect that seems to be lost on an unquestioning U.S. media that is captivated by anti-Russia hysteria. But as Trump rushes to punish Syria, the media is ignoring and depriving the public of some crucial details leading up to the alleged attack. Yeah, not the least of which would be True News reporting on it 2 weeks ago. But anyway, details that raise serious questions about who's responsible. And then this goes on to talk about, Joe, and I'll cut it here for the sake of time, but the sub headline is Suspicious Timing, and it just opens up with, the Syrian government is in a stronger position than it has been since the war began and has absolutely nothing to gain from launching a chemical weapons attack. that's the beginning. That's the smoke coming out of the barrel of the gun right there. It just makes, I can't find one logical reason why Assad would do this when he's prevailing better than he has in the last 5 years.
There isn't any. And, you know, we're going to continue to dig into this and be vigilant, not only with the evidence of the chemical attack following anything that we see as far as evidence, but we're also going to be obviously following the president and president of Russian, Vladimir Putin's response. And the potential for the conflict is really, I'd say, is lessening each hour that goes by that we don't see a retaliatory strike from the United States. And that gives me hope that we will see, cooler heads prevail, and we won't see the president being sucked in by this false flag and taking action that would alienate his base, especially before the midterms in 2018. And we've talked a lot about the Trump wanting to pull the rest of the remaining troops out of Syria just a few weeks ago. And John, you made a great point before the show, because with Chance on here, we're going to be talking about veterans and one particular veteran and what many have been going through since returning from combat missions in the Middle East. And we see so much emphasis and focus on what it is that is coming up in as far as the potential for conflict and war. But so often we forget about those who have served before, and we have this huge problem with the VA, with the Veterans Administrations, and care for people who are veterans with ailments from PTSD and on and on and on. There are an unbelievable number of homeless veterans in our country, an unbelievable number of veterans who are not receiving benefits or can't get the proper medical care. And to me, that is appalling, and that is something that needs to change immediately. If anybody should be taken care of, first and foremost, it should be the people who put their lives on the line to defend the freedoms of this country. But we have this opposite type attitude. At least that's what it seems like in our country, where these people are falling through the cracks. And whether it's intentional or not, we don't know. But Chance, it's great to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having me, guys. Today, I'm upset, okay? And today is not going to be as much of a positive message as it's going to be a call to action. I'm going to start with what just happened last week. I'm going to tell you guys a story, and it's pretty upsetting. I had a young man in my office a week ago Thursday, and he was living out of his car. He was depressed and just needed an opportunity. A good friend and brother in Christ, Troy, brought him over, and we sat down. We talked for about 45 minutes, and he shared some of his background and some of the things that he was going through. But was excited that the one positive thing in his life was that he might just get custody of his 14-year-old son. So I said, you know what, Tom, I really like you. And I tell you what, I'm going to give you an opportunity to work the rodeo circuits here in Texas and Oklahoma. Let's follow up next week. And so he left, and first we prayed together. He was saved, and I get a call on Saturday, guys, and from my friend Troy, and Tom had committed suicide. And it was
That's terrible.
It was painful, but brothers, it was frustrating more than anything else. It was very frustrating because he didn't get the help that he needed. He told Troy that he was thinking about committing suicide, and Troy did everything he could. He prayed for him, and he quoted him scriptures, but he ended his life. And the sad thing, guys, is he left behind a fiance who was pregnant with his child, and she's due in about 2 months. They had gotten in a huge fight a couple of months ago, and he moved out and was living in his truck. He also leaves behind a 14-year-old son in California, and now that 14-year-old kid is without a dad. And I'm upset. I'm upset because I know, and you guys know both, that this is repeated all over our country. There are guys out there that are living on the streets, living in cars, living in tents. They're skipping meals. They're cold during the winter and hot during the summer, and they get sick. And a lot of this is due to depression. I've got some statistics in front of me. Guys, I want to read this to you. This is just appalling, absolutely appalling. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. As of today, 40% of all adult suicide are veterans. In 2014 alone, there were 7,388 veterans who committed suicide, and half of those were just in 14 states, our southern states like Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, and areas like that where, the income levels are, near or below the poverty line. And that's where a lot of that depression starts. These guys, they serve their country, they put their lives at risk for us, and they come back. And they have some things that they're dealing with, and they can't find a job, or, it's PTSD and other mental illnesses, and they're not getting the help. They're getting drugs, they're getting pharmaceuticals, and it's just a Band-Aid, guys. It's all it is. It's a Band-Aid, and it's not a cure, right? And they need the help. And so over the weekend, I made some phone calls, and I tell you, God's hand was all over this, because we now have a program called Adopt a Vet. And Ross Powell from Survival 401k is our accountant. This is completely nonprofit. The way that it works is, to adopt a vet, you will go to our new website, which will be launched next week, and there'll be a tab called Adopt a Vet. You'll be able to correspond by letter or email with a vet one-on-one, and that's what this whole program is about. It's just one-on-one. We're going to get food to these guys. We're going to get sleeping bags. We're going to whatever they need. I had a guy yesterday from Washington, and John, you know who I'm talking about. He couldn't sleep, and he needed some help getting to sleep without taking these drugs. I think he was taking Activan or something like that. So we sent him some natural sleep aids that really work. So it's just the need is so great, and not on my watch will we ever have another suicide from one of our guys. We're going to have at least 50 veterans that are in need right now, and you'll be able to sponsor that veteran, to adopt that veteran for a 30-day period, whatever they might need, and you'll be able to communicate back and forth with that veteran. So for those folks that are listening, if you have any questions or you'd like to get started right away, just please send us an email to bugoutamerica@usa.com, BUGOUT America@usa.com, or just feel free to give me a call if you'd like. And our phone number is 818-720-0759, 818-720-0759. And last, if you are a veteran and you're hurting, you're in pain, and you're thinking about committing suicide, there's a Veterans Crisis Line, and that number, this is what they do all day, every day, 24 hours. That number is 1-800-273-8255, and then press 1. 1-800-273-8255. If you're even contemplating suicide, please give them a call. And if you just need fellowship, you just want another brother to talk to, you can call us 24/7 as well. Just give us a call as well. So thank you guys for letting me pass on that somber message.
Well, Chance, thank you. I just want to chime in quickly. For our listeners who don't know, I've been friends with Chance for about 5 years now, and the way that we met the Hagmanns, the first time that we all sat down and broke bread, was the journey that we made back in the spring of 2014 to the Whitestone Conference. And Chance, you probably remember, as do I, and I'm sure Merrill does too, that one of our primary motivations when we went back to the conference in 2014 in Bozeman, Montana, was this project that we all really wanted to do called Honorably Employed. And the mission statement was great. We wanted to use Chance's extensive connections with vets who are suffering from PTSD or other maladies that aren't quite as severe around the country, who really, first and foremost, almost to the man and woman, they needed a job. And we know Americans are so driven by what we do for a living. If a man meets another man in public, one of the first things they ask when they shake your hand is, "So what do you do?" It is detrimental to any man to say, "Well, I do nothing. I sit in the house and watch TV and take meds." And so we wanted to get this thing called Honorably Employed up and running. Chance, you may remember you and I went down to pick up a case of stethoscopes in LA, and we talked about it in the truck that day. That was when the idea first burst. Now, the reason I mention all of this is because the day we got home from Whitestone, we went out for a burger on the way home from the airport. And Chance, I remember an individual called you while we were sitting on the patio waiting for our food. And I want to emphasize to our listeners how serious PTSD really is, because I didn't completely understand it being a civilian until I was privy to this conversation. This gentleman went from okay to 1,000 degrees RPM, tacking over in the red zone, screaming at Chance. You could hear this person's complaints and gripes and fears from across the table on a cell phone. And he had, Chance, I don't know exactly what you call it, but he had basically like a PTSD meltdown. And yourself and your wife and I witnessed it that day, having just come back from Montana trying to put together a project that sounds very similar to what you're doing now. And I want to hand it back to you to reiterate the Adopt a Vet program, because this really takes the honorably employed concept and the old HH Connections concept, and it kind of marries the two together, and it gives people the opportunity to do what Chance and myself and the Hagmanns have been doing since we all became acquainted 5+ years ago, and that is getting as much direct help to vets as we can. And all three of us, Joe, myself, and Chance, we've all contributed, donated time, money, etc., to directly putting the food, the sleeping bags, etc., into vets' lives who need them. And yes, Chance, I know exactly who you're referring to in Washington, but go ahead.
Yeah, and to answer your question, that's called a PTSD event. And it's very common among those that suffer from PTSD. It's almost like a Jekyll and Hyde scenario where one word, one specific word or comment or a phrase can set them off. And what you have to do in situations like that is just be a good listener, because they don't want you to comment. They don't want you to chime in. They want to be heard, and they just need to get it out of their system, and then they calm down. Some longer than others, but I've had other conversations. I remember that one, but I've had others where a guy would go on for an hour about everything that he hates about life, and the thing is, you just have to be there for him, okay? And so the Adopt a Vet program is basically the same principle, but it's one-on-one, meaning you, the sponsor of the veteran, will be able to communicate with that veteran through letters. We don't do it by phone, and there's a reason for that, because you don't necessarily want to deal with that unless you're trained, right? A phone call can be very dangerous, and you could say the wrong thing, right? So, so you'll be able to communicate back and forth with the veteran. It's for a 30-day period of time. You can choose the amount, how much you want to assist. But I do want you to know there'll be a third-party accounting through Survival 401k Ross, and not one dime goes to administration or profit or anything. And every single penny goes to the veteran that you're adopting. And so we'll have spreadsheets to send over. So listen, guys, again, thank you. Thank you so much for allowing me to kind of vent today, but at the same time offer a solution to this ongoing issue that we're having with our vets.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so important as we see, some of the horrific news headlines over the last few years of conditions at VA hospitals, from, termites to cockroaches, and to what we see with so many veterans unable to get not only the mental care, but just care in general, whether that be, the VA system or their benefits from the VA, from their service. And it is frustrating. We shouldn't be having these kind of problems, especially in a country that's trillions and trillions of dollars a year are spent on all kinds of social welfare programs. Well, billions of dollars a year. I don't know how much, if you total up welfare and everything, what that runs. But we should be taking care of the veterans first and foremost. And you can't say it enough that it's a shame that we even have to have these conversations. But the suicide rates, Chance, that you threw out there, those are terrifying. 7,500 veterans committed suicide last year in America.
2014, 7,388 veterans committed suicide.
Yeah, when we were at Whitestone, I remember sitting down in the coffee shop the morning that we first met, Joe, you and I, when we met in the hallway that morning. I was writing up copy. It was sort of copy that would help you and your dad understand the honorably employed program. And at that time, it was 22 to 23 vets per day that were committing suicide. Now, this wasn't just vets from the recent wars. It included the Vietnam era and even Korea. But this at a time, gentlemen, where right here, front and center on Drudge, feds collect record income taxes through March, still run $599.7 billion deficit. And I think back to some of the Native American tribes that were the more warlike tribes, the Crow, the Sioux, and that they took care of their warriors at the absolute top echelon of their societies. And that, of course, goes back thousands of years. And it is inexcusable, in my opinion, and I'll make this my final comment for today, Chance. In my opinion, it is inexcusable that we have veterans living in tents, that we have veterans. I can't emphasize this enough, listeners. I've been present with Chance on 2 or 3 occasions where the individual on the other end of the phone needed help right now. Like, this wasn't a, well, we'll get to you when we can get to you type thing. This was kind of a code blue moment. And Joe, without going into detail, you were privy to one of those. I remember it from, again, 2014. So this is a very serious situation. And Chance, it sounds like what you've got cooking here is an opportunity for people to put some of their funds in a direct sort of to cauterize the bleeding, so to speak, but they also get to interact with that person, which gives people the sort of satisfaction of knowing, hey, the $50 or the $100 or whatever that I sent actually made it home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe, that the Lord put this on our hearts for a reason. And it took this young man, Tom, it took that suicide to give me that final push. But brother, we're all in, and I know that you guys are all too. So please reach out to us. Everyone listening, reach out to us. Even prayer. Please pray for this program. John, Joe, if you guys can just spread the word wherever you can. You know what? You'd be surprised. One little act of kindness, how far that can go, and maybe, just maybe, save someone's life so that they don't take their own.
Absolutely, Chance, and thank you so much for getting in front of issues like this and spearheading these campaigns to help people who are in need. And it's an awesome idea, the Adopt a Vet program, and it could help a lot of people, and who knows the lives that it could save in the long run.
And
Absolutely.
Chance, we'll get you back on as soon as you have the website up with the proper tab and whatever. Just give Joe or I a call, and we'll find you some time here early next week. We've got Sheila Zielinski joining us as our guest tomorrow on Friday the 13th. We've got the Weekend Vigilante coming in. But Chance, we'll find you some time, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week, and we'll get this thing up and running. We'll get it up on its feet. And then we get to actually see you, brother, and have some fellowship next weekend at the Occupy 2018 conference in Ohio.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it. Maybe, John, we can get together and you can write an article about this. I can give you some content and statistics. Maybe we can write an article just to spread the word.
I would be happy to.
So important, guys.
In fact, Chance, it's a God shot and a blessing you would mention that opportunity. I was just thinking before we started the Hagmann Daily Show today, my last article posted Monday morning. I'd like to get another one out this week. I bandied some ideas around with Doug Hagmann yesterday, and it left me without a topic. And I would love. Why don't you shoot me the stuff that you were using for your show prep today? I'll bang out a 1,000-worder, 1,500-worder in rough draft form. I'll send it back to you. We'll clean it up, and we'll get it up tomorrow morning.
You got it. I'll take care of it.
Awesome. Thanks, Chance, so much for coming on. And again, simplycleanfoods.net, promo code simplyclean. Chance is the owner, and you can support us by buying your survival storable food needs from Simply Clean Foods, as well as using the promo code Simply Clean. And keep your eye out for the Adopt a Vet program, and we will absolutely be promoting it and announcing, talking about it at length when you get the website set up. So thanks for all the great work you do, Chance, and for sponsoring the show.
Thank you, and God bless you both.
God bless you too.
God bless you, brother. Stay strong, Chance.
Will do. Bye.
All right, we got about 5 minutes left here, and I guess we can do this with the time we have remaining.
That was sorry, Joe, but that was really something. I having again been around in 2014, 2015 when these vets check in, and Chance's phone basically, I don't know if it's still the same. I suspect it is, but in 2015, his phone basically rings nonstop throughout the business day. And I would say half those calls they have nothing to do with orders or shipping or anything like that. He spends a lot of time on the phone with these people. It's really, I don't know if he calls it this. It's a ministry that American Survival Wholesale and simplycleanfoods.net puts at the forefront of their business model. And frankly, it works. But Joe, you and I both, and your dad, we've been front and center on this. There's been a number of times where I subsidized, to a frankly kind of steep price tag a couple of times, getting food to veterans. I think immediately of last year when we sent 4 buckets of a 1 month storable food program. That really touched me. For X number of dollars, we were able, between the Hagmann Report, myself, and Chance and his company, we were able to get 64 families or individuals who served our country. They literally woke up 2 days later to a 5-gallon bucket of proper storable food on the front porch, free and clear. American Survival Wholesale covered the cost of the food. I covered the shipping as part of my tithe last year. And that, let me tell you, listeners, when you involve yourself in something like that, it brightens your entire week. It makes you truly feel like you did more than just consume all this difficult to digest information. It really makes you feel like you landed a good hard punch back at the evil in this world.
Absolutely, it does, and it has, awesome, as you said, not only the help that it brings to those in need, but also for your own personal and spiritual well-being. It does play a huge role. And it is so important that we not only speak about these things, but take part and participate in, being part of the solution, part of the positive change to help as many people as possible. And there's nothing, there's nothing better you can do with your life than to help other people especially who are in need. And it's so beneficial to everybody who's involved. So, yeah, it's great.
Joe, it balances out. Forgive me, but it balances out. It's so important that when you consume all this difficult information every day, that you put actions into your life that balance it. Otherwise, this information, the dark days that we live in, will eat you alive.
Yes, it will. I mean, just look at what we're seeing now. What I wanted to make sure we mentioned is just real quick, James Comey, as there is this new interest in what James Comey is talking about, and his new book is coming out, and the Republican National Committee has launched a new website ahead of the book coming out, Lying Comey, to counter the narrative that Comey's putting out there that the president, did you hear this? He's called the president a mob boss, which is absolutely hysterical to me. This coming from the man who has protected the biggest political mob boss we've seen in recent U.S. history, being Hillary Clinton.
Joe DeGenova last night on Hannity, biggest news show in that time slot, bar none. He straight up called James Comey, quote, a dirty cop, end quote. And then he followed that up with calling Assistant Attorney General Rosenstein, quote, incompetent, end quote.
Yeah, and this website, Lyin Comey, Lyin Comey, does things like take Maxine Waters' clip from January 2017 saying the FBI has no credibility, and then they use Comey's own quotes. It's lyoncomey.com, and I'm going to be checking that out. It's the plan to fact check Comey's book and use rapid response to highlight any misstatements or contradictions in it that, according to the RNC, Comey is a liar and a leaker. His misconduct led both the Republicans and Democrats calling for his firing. We'll have more on this later. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow.
The Hagmann Daily Show is brought to you by the Hagmann Report. Tune in to the Hagmann Report weekdays, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, go to HagmannReport.com. That's HagmannReport.com.